Welcome to another episode of Parenting Teens Advice Redefined for today's world. And today we are diving into a crucial conversation about building resilient students who are prepared for success, not just in school, but as future leaders. My guest is Dr. Cedric Howard, published author and nationally recognized leader in higher education. With career success dedicated to students, Dr. Howard has been honored as one of the most 10 inspiring people in education and has played a pivotal role in transforming educational pathways from K to 12 to college. His expertise in student engagement, enrollment, management, and leadership development has been featured in national publications, making him a true leader and change maker in education. Dr. Howard, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cheryl. How are you today?
I'm just great. How are you?
Wonderful. Looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. And I want to start with what is your story? Why are you where you are right now? What is your mission? What's your goal? Let's hear all about Dr. Cedric.
Yeah, it is so interesting. It's kind of like my why. My why is, really simple, but I think is powerful from the perspective of that my why both saved me and then gave me a career trajectory that I am in today. And so I was born into a single family, single parent home. My mother, unfortunately, at that point in time, got married, got pregnant at a young age. She's never been married, so even to this day. And so, as a youngster, I was that statistic, welfare, potentially, on the path to get in trouble. But she, at a very young age, said, I have a very different set of expectations. And so she gave herself a timetable. At the end of the time that he turns 1, I would like to be off of welfare. I would like to get out of the place that I am living, and get an apartment. And that set a very clear set of expectation and trajectory for me. And so her tool was to make sure that I understood that education, not just formal education, but informal aspects of education were extremely important. And so I grew up in a household where not just reading was important, but application of the reading and applications of the lessons was really important. And that led to me being the first person in my family to go to college. And now I've graduated and have 4 degrees, including 2 doctorates. But I think the most powerful transformation in my family occurred when I graduated, with my undergraduate degree. My grandmother was so proud. You can't tell I'm over 6 foot tall, and she was under 5 foot tall. And she asked for my graduation gown, and I said, "No, Grandma, this belongs to me." And that strong, Southern African American voice, she says, "No, I'm going to tell you one more time. Give me your gown." And I took it off, and it draped her like just a cover. Mm-hmm. And she asked all of my cousins. She says, "Get in this gown." And she says, "Grandma, I have one request. From this standpoint forward, now that we have the first college graduate, it is incumbent upon you that every single one of you need to bring me your graduation gown from college." And that changed the trajectory of my family. I was the first. There's 18 grandkids as we speak. 17 of them have college degrees, and the last one, number 18, is actually a senior in college. And so this Mother's Day, we have a case on my grandmother's grave. We would go to put the 18th gown in to fulfill the mandate, and like I said, change the trajectory of my family. But it was because of the role of parenting. It was a role of expectation. It was a role of setting a clear path that began first with my mother, and then really communicated in a very symbolic manner with my grandmother at a time that was very important for my family. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I work hard. That's why I realized that in my world, I as a college vice president, as someone who works in the community, I come from a place of privilege, because I determine the acceptance of thousands of kids each and every year. And I realize that's a place of privilege. And for me,
Yeah.
I can either open the door and make sure there's greater access, or I can make that door more restrictive. I have chosen to realize that that door should be as open as possible, but the expectation of not just going to college is important, but making sure that you complete college and complete your set of studies. Because four-year college and four-year university might not be for everyone. If trade school is important for you, if community college or getting a trade is important for you, it is incumbent upon me to make sure that you're going to fulfill and get the training you need in order to become the best version of yourself possible.
Okay, I now have no words, which has never happened. That what an amazing story, and congratulations, and no wonder she's so proud of you. And it's when you first started about your mom setting an intention and an expectation, I just feel like I'm very much about mindset work. And I feel like that just cleared the path. That just there's no options now. There's the goal. There's no backup plan. There's the options. And what a beautiful way to grow up. Like, that is privilege as well.
Yeah,
To have a
it
parent.
is interesting. I oftentimes when I tell my story or say the story, I oftentimes begin with the end. And people oftentimes, they know me, or now my mother is prominent in her field, or they know my daughter. And I said, yes, I'm going to tell you the story of the three Dr. Howards, three generations, but you see where we've ended. You don't know where we began.
Yeah.
And for me, to be the first to go to college, and then to get to the point that literally I was in my first year of my doctoral studies, and I get a call on a Saturday from my mother. And she said, I've had an epiphany. I said, what is your epiphany? She says, I've been working in the paper mill for almost 30 years. I can retire after 30 years, which is in 6 months. I really want to make a difference. And I want to go back and help people that were very similar to me. I said, well, let's go for it. She says, but I need your help. I said, not a problem. Be careful what you agree to. It's not a problem. I'm here to help you. And I said, so what are you going to do? She says, I'm going to go back to school. I said, okay, no problem. I'll pay for the training. She says, no, I'm going to go to college. And I said, okay, what is holding you back? She says, tuition. So I need for you to pay my tuition. And I said, hey, I don't have any problems with that. She went and got a bachelor, master's, and doctorate in counseling. And now, she runs a feeding center. She runs counseling for marriages. And the most important thing is she opened several homes for abusive women to make sure to change the trajectory of their particular family. And then, the brain trust of the family is my daughter. Very extremely smart, graduated college at 16, graduated medical school at 21 and 26. She's a urologist and doing well. And so I said, so oftentimes when you invest in the lives of one person, they can come and change generations of a family. And that's, I go back to the fact that my mom had a goal that by the time I turned 1, we were going to be off of government assistance. And then the fast forward, some 20 years later, when my grandmother said, hey, this is the expectation, this is a new normal for our family. And really it was all about, setting realistic goals and then driving us towards that goal. Because now, as you know, as an educator, your habits, your attitudes, and your behavior are really shaped based upon your expectations.
Yes.
And so when you have expectations, they serve as kind of your North Star. And then your habits are the behaviors, and your attitudes get you to ultimately to overcome the challenges and get you to focus on what is most important for that particular child and what is the internal motivation. And I think that was what I think that I take with me as an educator, and I take with me, into my day-to-day work, because I realize that every child is different. But when you establish a ecosystem, an environment where a child feels valued and seen, they can achieve greatness.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I want to, just as a side note, your story reminds me so much of the Starbucks CEO, Howard, where they were born in New York and on welfare. And I know you know the story, but every time I go past a Starbucks, or every time I hear somebody say, "Oh, Starbucks," but the story, and they're living at the end of the L train. And she said, "This is not the end of the line for you." Every night they went to bed, "This is not the end of the line for you." And now he owns 30 bajillion Starbucks. And it was just that expectation, or that intention from his mom, just opened up all these pathways for him that he otherwise would never have seen the possibility. And it just, so it's not a one-off. This is not, oh, lucky Dr. Cedric. This is not how it works. So I love that story. And I would love to dive into, when you talk about habits and expectations and attitude, can we break that down?
Yes. Yeah. So if you think about, I just refer to them as an acronym, hapes, so your habits, your attitudes, your behavior, and expectations, really, when you know child psychology, and my undergraduate degree is in psychology. When you understand child psychology, you realize that a child's personality, their hapes, is really developed by the time 85% of their hapes are developed by the time they're 5. And so what are the habits, the foundational aspects of the habits? What is the attitude they're going to look at as it relates to life and their behavior, and then the expectations that they're going to be in? So when you understand that, I oftentimes say when I'm speaking to educators, that a kid who comes from a house where they feel love comes to school to learn. But a child that comes from a house that they don't feel love comes to school to receive that love. And so when you're interacting with them and you realize that they're in an environment that a family has a habit of expressing love, not financial, it is love. Do you feel valued? Do you feel seen? Then that child feels permission to come into the institution's higher education to learn, because they know that it's going to be reinforced when they get back home. And that oftentimes shape their attitude. And when I'm dealing with educators and special administrators, and I said, if you have a child that may be demonstrating some adverse behavior or attitude, sit them down and say, "Hey, I love you. I care about you." Because really that's what they're asking for. They're giving you permission to say, "Hey, you're worth me investing in." And I know that sometimes, the emotional, social emotional capital, the emotional resiliency, once you recognize it, now you've gotten that child to a place where they feel comfortable to say, "Okay, this is a safe place. Now I want to come and invest in that particular process. And I want to come invest my talents and really demonstrate who I am from that perspective." So starting with, understanding a child's habits, are they coming with certain skills? Do they have, the ability to focus? Do they have the ability to just understand the importance of writing? If they don't, then start there. Give them tools. Unfortunately, as you know, across the world, we have this digital divide as it relates to technology. Some have the ability to have access and others do not. So, you have to realize that, okay, you may not have access to technology, but you can bring technology and technological infrastructures into that child's life, even if it's just while they're in class. And then the attitudes. What do you believe? How do you believe those things? How do you view yourself? I oftentimes say the greatest struggle that a child has to overcome, just like a person, is the battle within themselves, that self-talk. Do you believe in that? Okay, even though I fail, I'm not a failure. And when you begin to understand that self-talk can help you to overcome stress, it can help you to overcome, times where you are failing, and realize it's just a temporary part that I need to grow from, an opportunity, to develop as a person, and not that I should give up. And then that shapes your behavior. Do you have healthy behavior? Do you have behaviors where you're getting sleep? Do you have behavior when you're taking care of yourself? Do you have behaviors where you are taking and embracing interests that are motivating and motivational to you? it is interesting, and I tell the story very briefly. So when I have two kids, and we, since the time they were 6 weeks old, the moment that we have permission, we would take them on vacation trips just to see everything. You know, if they say, you know, giraffe, we're going to a zoo to see it. If they say, you know, we're studying, you know, something, you know, the Eiffel Tower, then, you know, we're blessed and fortunate to say, okay, we want to go so they can see it, so they can touch it. And so literally yesterday, my daughter and I was talking, and she says, Dad, you know, I've realized that my why is that I work extremely hard in the medical field so I can go and experience things. And I said, how did you realize that? She says, because yes, work is fine, but I enjoy work because it allows me to go on vacations and see the world. But it just hit me that you taught me that at a very young age. That it's one thing to see it and to read about it. It's another thing to actually go and put your hands on it and touch it. And so I work hard in order to go on vacations and see things. I said, that is powerful. That is your hate. That is what I taught you to, you know, because I realized that you were extremely gifted, but you were a little standoffish and shy. So by exposing you to something, you can interact with it based upon your own desires, which is very different than your brother's. Your brother's extrovert. So in his situation, I put him in situations where he had to do a lot of talking, and, you know, and put him in front of people because that was his energy. And so I think understanding your child's hapes, understanding your child attitudes, behaviors, then you begin to see what is intrinsically motivating them, because those hapes will become their why. And once you understand their why, now you can help them to become their what, and accept the who they actually are.
I love that what you just spoke about extrovert and introvert, because I feel like sometimes parents are, well, he's shy, so I have to throw him into all these different situations to break down that shyness. Or she's way too much, so I need to put her in situations where she needs to be a little bit smaller. And that's the opposite of what we need to do. The opposite. We need to meet kids where they're at and who they are and develop I'm an introvert. No one would ever believe I'm an introvert because I do this and I never shut up. However, at the end of this, I will need to unplug, go for a walk, have no interaction, have no input, and recharge. So
Yes.
I just find that, and as an adult, that's what I'm doing. So I'd love to say, now I'm going to dive into the parent thing for a minute, because how do parents not just tell their kids, here's a good habit for you to be in. Here's what I expect from you. Here's what your attitude should be. How do parents turn that inside and say, because kids aren't always, they don't always listen to us. However, they are always watching us. So what do we want our kids to see? And I'm going to say to parents who are like, well, my kid's 18, it's too late. It's never too late. It's never too late.
Yeah.
So how can parents turn inside? Like, what can they do, like tactically at home, to say, okay, I'm not going to preach to you. I'm going to do this so you see it. What can they do?
Yeah, Cheryl, great perspective. The two things that come top of mind for me is to focus on encouraging effort over perfection. And that's the importance of emphasizing the effort rather than perfection should be the guiding tool as part of the pedagogy and learning process of a particular child. Parents should encourage their kids to take pride in the learning process and not just the end result. I oftentimes say the process determines the product that a child and a person produces. And so focus on the small wins. Yeah, they got it right this time, you know, other than you always got to do this and you always got to do that. And I think it's important to embrace the ideal that mistakes and setbacks are part of the growth process. That when you foster a growth mindset within your child, that prevents burnout. It prevents anxiety that's related to unrealistic perfectionist standards, which are usually, from my perspective, an overlay of something that the parent did not accomplish, and so they want their child to accomplish it. You got to realize they're not you. And if you nurture them properly, they should actually do better than you because they're not starting from the same place as you. I always tell my kids that, listen, my kids should be a lot better than I am, and their kids should be better than them. And that's kind of a way of looking at it. And I would also say the second thing is set realistic expectations, and embrace balance. And I call it the importance of realistic expectations, that keeps and help you to realize that they are human and that they're developing and they need time to learn, they need time to grow, they need time to also relax and recharge. They can't be involved in everything, when you set expectations that are challenging but attainable, that ensures that that particular child does not feel overwhelmed and feel that they can accomplish certain things. And that as a parent, you should create an environment where you are nurturing, and practicing affirmation, so that your child gets the cues that they need to know that they're making progress, and making the right decisions. Because remember, you're teaching them how to fish and not always giving them the fish, just because that can create a dependency that you have to come back and create later on. I oftentimes says knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. Knowledge is potential, but if you never activate the power, it never becomes the power that you desire. So you give them knowledge, and then you teach them the tool to apply the knowledge that they have, even within themselves and around others, and that helps to ground you in your interactions and working with your particular kid or child, or those that you're working with within the classroom.
And speaking from a teacher point of view, what it looks like when somebody says, don't go after the end result or perfection, go after the skills they're developing. When you're looking at a report card, we're not looking at the marks, we're looking at the learning skills.
Yes.
And how do we improve those learning skills? Because the learning skills are lifelong skills. The A plus in math might not be, but how they got to the A plus in math, I feel like when you get to these the goal is not the thing. It's who they become getting to the goal. It's who they build themselves up as getting to the goal. And that's where those celebrating those small wins are like, oh my God, look, you did. And if you didn't, can you go back and look, well, yeah, you might have struggled here, but remember when you did this? Remember when you did that? Like sometimes, and I think that's for all of us, we are so set in raising the bar and getting forward and doing the next thing. And sometimes we get stuck in that frustration and we forget how we got to where we were a year ago. I didn't know how to record a podcast. Are you kidding me? Like, I didn't know what to plug in. I didn't know what I needed. I probably would have forgot to record everything. And then a year later, I'm like, oh, is this going where I want it to go? Well, yeah, because look what I've done. We have to stop and celebrate our own wins as well as our kid wins. I think that who they are becoming in the middle is the dream, is the thing.
Yeah. And I think just recognizing, a child's growth, and what they have learned, their personal development and the challenges that they overcome really motivates them to push through the next time. And acknowledging that achievement and effort can go hand in hand. But the affirmation and validation is extremely important.
Yeah, I agree. So let's get a little bit tactical so parents can get their pens out now. What are the biggest, and today, this podcast is for today's world. So I say this all the time. We can't parent the way we were parented. Things aren't available. Different things are here. We're facing different challenges. What are the biggest challenges parents are facing when their kids are transitioning? I guess what their teens are facing when they're transitioning from high school to college or workforce. Like, what are those challenges in between?
Yeah. So oftentimes, I would say the greatest challenge is the lack of clarity of what you ultimately like to become and what you like to focus on. I mean, we can call the handful of professions. We've told a child, okay, hey, you want to grow up and be an attorney. You want to grow up and be a doctor. You want to grow up and be an athlete. And being a lawyer or physician or an athlete, they may not have the skill sets, but we've left out the vast majority of occupations that they can enjoy. So I would say that as soon as possible, whether you're in middle school, ninth, 10th grade, early secondary school, do a career assessment. Find out what your child interests actually are, and then nurture those interests from that perspective. And I kind of give you a practical example, and then write a plan out for them to accomplish what the interest actually is. Give you a practical example. So our youngest, which is very different than his older sisters. Her older sisters is academically sound, a charger, wants to be and read everything. Her younger brother can care less about reading. Her younger brother, will like to be some, athletic field, doing whatever. And it had nothing to do with athletic. He just loves competition. And so I said, well, let's figure out what are your interests. And he came, and we found out that he loves to be in nature. He loves to be out, either fishing or, doing something with his hands. And so I said, okay, well, how can we make this a career for you? And he says, Dad, I don't necessarily care what I do, as long as I'm happy doing it, as long as I am doing it in nature. Well, fast forward, some 10, 15 years later, he's a naval officer and doing what he's doing out, on the seas. And he loves what he do. Now, imagine if I would have forced him to be a physician like his sister. It would have never worked. Yeah. Imagine if I would have said, okay, yeah, but I want you to go into education like your dad or engineering like your mom. It would have never worked. But we created a system for him. Once we find his interest based upon his hapes, we develop a plan and says, okay, remember the process determine the product that you produce. So we develop a plan to say, as long as you focus on the things that you are focused on in high school. So rather than taking calculus, he actually took vocational tech and learned how to do things in forestry, because that was what his interests were. And then, when it came time to make decisions, we say, okay, let's pull out your itinerary. Let's pull out your game plan. Let's pull out the plan that we have for you. Have we accomplished the things that laid out? Okay, now is college the best thing for you? And he says, I want to go to college because it is incumbent upon, remember, my great grandmother, that we all have college degrees. Now, what I do with my degree is very different. And so, he went to college and got a degree in forestry, and now is in the Navy and kind of just go from there. So the thing that I say is, as soon as possible, try to get your child assessed. A career inventory to see what the interests actually are. And if you see that they have a passion for what those interests and career and occupations are, and they're committed to it, then develop what is the process that you're going to do in order to get them to where they can practice and perform that particular interest 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now, because their happiness is in the things that is attractive to them. And, and then ultimately, they will accomplish the things that you desire within life. So the very first thing is identify what your kids' strengths are, see where there's an interest, develop a plan, write the plan down, and then gather a system around them to support them according to the plan that you have outlined for them.
And I feel like this whole methodology system would completely wipe out midlife crisis. When people spend 30 years in a career they didn't really want, was kind of pushed on them, and then they get to the point where, like, I've spent 30 years doing shit I don't want to do, and now I have to stop and go. And like, there's my mission right there for today. Eliminate midlife crisis, people, because this is where it starts. You know, you can have these great dreams for your kids, but they're your dreams. They're not their dreams. And it might seem, oh, great, you've paid for their tuition, they've done what you want them to do. But is it worth it when now you have to repair the damage? I don't think
Yes.
it's worth it. I really don't think it's worth it. So let's talk about that. The kids in their college program,
Yeah.
2 years in, oh my God, I hate it. I failed
Yes.
everything. I'm depressed. I have anxiety. Now what?
Yeah. It is interesting. So, interesting statistic. In many higher education institutions, I'm not going to say most, many, after that first year, you actually lose more 4.0 high school students than you do kids that got kicked out for conduct and behavior.
Ooh.
And the reason that is the case is because the world post-secondary is very different. You know, you don't have someone telling you to go to class. You don't have someone telling you, what to do, when to do it. You don't have someone waking you up. You don't have someone checking in on your homework, telling you when to wash clothes or when to eat. When you have to figure all those things out and you haven't been taught those things before you get into the academy or the university, now you see why a lot of kids struggle, especially that first year. In one of my books, The Unshakable Leadership, I actually go through a theory. I call it the nerdy way because that's what I actually have taught my kids. And nerdy is an acronym. The N stands for knowledge, the E stands for education, the R stands for research, and then discovery. The D is discovery, and the Y is for you. And so it is a process that developed with my kids that I've tried to articulate in a systemic way and a methodology to help others. I said, when you're working with your child, realize that knowledge, they have a knowledge base. And that knowledge base is their knowledge base, not yours. It is theirs. It is their beginning place. What you do is you take education. It is whatever training process you need. That's the E part. And you train them, whether it is at home, whether it's in school, whether it is participating in a extracurricular activity, that becomes their training cycle. And then the research part is, how do I take the personal development of that child and then reinvest it so they become a better version of themselves? And that's where the discover from you comes in. And so everything that I have done or everything that I do, I begin with, this is the beginning place. Realize that we're going to develop and we're going to grow and we're going to go through a change management process. That's the education. And then we're going to research it. In higher education, we call that evaluation or assessment. And then we're going to tweak. And then we're going to say, how can we become a better version of ourselves, a better version of our office, a better version of a program, a better version of an individual, so that you can discover a new version of who you are. That's how we elevate who we are from that perspective. And so oftentimes in my family, you hear my family walk around and says, oh, that's just nerdy. Oh, I'm about to go through a nerdy process, because they've been trained to realize that when they go through that, that's usually a growth process for them. And that is an acronym they can have in their mind, so that they're not they don't say stuff like, I can't do it. What they say is, I haven't figured out how to do it yet. And that's not possible. Yeah, it is possible. I just need to learn how to do it. And so that's why I just offer that, from, to parents and so forth. Think about where your child is. That's where they're at. That's the foundation they have. What is the process you're going to use to educate them? And that can go in the various ways. That's kind of where the assessment comes in. And then work with them to take the lessons that they've learned to redevelop who they are and to elevate who they are, and then discover a new version of them and celebrate that new version of them. Remember, a commencement is not an ending. To commence means to begin. So when you're graduating, you're going to commencement, realizing they're launching into a new phase and stage of their life, and they're a new version of themselves. And so just acknowledging that new version of themselves is extremely important.
And so this nerdy process can be at any time. It's an ongoing. It doesn't need to, they're into college a year and going, oh, I made a huge mistake, Mom. I know you've paid all this tuition. I've made a huge mistake. We can revisit that process.
Correct. Correct. And I have family members. That's why I say you go through midlife crisis. I have family members says, yes, I have to have a nerdy moment. I got to go through this nerdy moment. And I realized that's their way of saying, hey, I'm going through something. I need to go through retraining, or I need to go through redevelopment in life. And so I've given them the language, the jargon, and the process by which to transition out of whatever difficult time that they're going through.
I love that. So in your position now, what are colleges really wanting to see in our new entrants, our new registrants, our new students? What do they want to see? What are you looking for when you look at those applications and people and interviews?
So there are several types of institutions, and I want to kind of just articulate that for a second. Institutions are really outlined based upon their admissions process. And so there are some institutions that are open admissions, which simply means once you have attained the minimum qualifications, which is usually the completion of some type of high school or equivalent certification, you get assured admissions into our particular school. And that could be a 2-year, 4-year trade school. It is open admissions, and those are usually community-based institutions. And then you go through, and there are more selective institutions, and usually based upon the ranking or the perception or the status of that institution determines how restrictive that institution actually is. And so a lot of the large public institutions go through a admissions process where they're looking at 3 primary criteria: your academic resume, based upon the courses that you've taken in secondary education, your extracurricular involvement, what clubs, organization, community service work have you done, and your ability to articulate the desired outcomes. Why should I let you in? What will you contribute to my particular community? And that's usually the admissions letter. And oftentimes I say to anybody who's applying and they have to write an admissions letter, go to that school's mission, values, and vision statement, and understand what that campus is about, and write your admissions letter to that particular institution's mission, because that should be the core values that they particularly have. And then you have the selective schools, the highly selective schools that are what I consider to be ecosystems for keeping, I don't still want to call it a caste system, but they're ecosystem for keeping people at a certain economic level at that level. And very few outside of that particular socioeconomic class or caste actually get submission into those types of institutions. So know what type of institution you're applying for, but really it is based upon 3 things: your academic, what I consider your resume, which is your transcripts, and your extracurricular involvement, because many institutions want to know that you're a well-rounded person. And then what is the outcomes? If I give you access into our particular institution, what are you hoping to do? A helpful hint, one of my golden nuggets that I oftentimes leave with people: start the process as early as possible. If you have the ability to work with the 7th grader or 8th grader and say, I want you to start focusing on, if you're desiring to go to any post-secondary institution, we're not defining what that will become, but if you're desiring to go to it, begin to get involved, begin to focus on the classes that you take, begin to capture it from that perspective. I was speaking about 5 days ago at a conference for educators, and I had about 350 educators in the room. And I said, how many middle school teachers are here? And a couple of them, probably about 2 dozen. I say, if your 7th and 8th graders do not have a resume, you need to start now. And they said, why? I said, because you're teaching them habits they're going to use for the rest of their life. Just like we have a transcripts which capture their academic achievements, you need to teach them how to document all of the activities um, um, outside the classroom as a part of their resume. And that's a skill they can come with them, take with them the rest of life. And so that's what colleges are going to ask. That's also when you're looking for jobs, you can talk about, hey, I've been involved in doing community service since I was 12 or 13. Let me tell you some of the things I've done, and I've continued that throughout life. It becomes a powerful tool of selling themselves because they have to realize that they are a brand and they need to sell that version of that brand themselves. So beginning as soon as possible is an important golden nugget that I'll leave with all educators.
And I find when I think about writing a resume, it's almost like writing a gratitude journal.
Yes.
When you're writing a resume, it's all about the positive things about you. And if you can get kids to start writing down all the positive things about them, then their, reticular system starts looking for all the positive things about them because they're going to add it to their resume. So now that's like, wipe out the negative stuff. I don't need to know the negative stuff because I'm not writing that down. I'm going to start looking for, I want to buy a Porsche. I'm going to see a Porsche every day on the street.
There you go.
Right? I love that. That's so good to start early. So I want to get into something that's so prevalent, mental health and struggling college students, struggling teens. What can parents do to prepare teens for, building themselves that armor around mental health struggles when they get to college? And when they get there, how do we still, as parents back home, how are we supporting them through those? Like, we see it all the time. We see it every day. How are we supporting our kids who are going through these mental health struggles, or you're anticipating that mental health struggle?
Yeah, I think it's important as a parent to realize that first of all, you're a parent and not a friend. They have friends to affirm them, but as a parent, your job is to set a vision and a framework for them as a parent. And so that begins for me with developing trust with your particular child. And trust is usually developed through open communication and clear set of decision points. And so, okay, as a parent, how are you interacting with them? How are you communicating with them? Are you checking in with them? Are you transactional or are you relational? And I think it's important to be with your kids, to be transactional from the perspective of when things should be transacted, but relational to build a connective tissue that's going to last a lifetime. And so develop habits that are extremely important. Do you have a weekly or daily check-in with your child? Do you send them information just to encourage them? Hey, I know that you have this test today. I know that you're going to do well, but I'm proud of you. Have you said that during life challenges? Well, say, I'm the parent. I told you not to seek a relationship with that particular person. And you says, I can care less about the relationship. How are you doing? What can I do to be there to support you? How can we grow from this? Interacting relationships are going to go, but as a parent, I'm always there for you. Express, be authentic to express your feelings for your child and allow your child to express their authentic feelings back to you. And I think that's where you begin. And then secondly, to be non-judgmental, because they are eventually your child. You had a significant role in what they're becoming. And so if they make mistakes, then just simple to say, how do we grow from that mistake? And how do we develop and mature so that we don't make that mistake again? The moment we become judgmental, they shut down, and put up guards, and they put up, gates. But I think when you develop those relational aspects, that breaks down the gates, and it allows you to be there for them when they really need you. From that perspective. And that's why oftentimes where, I say that I'm a parent and not a friend, because as a parent, my role never ends. My role never dissipates.
Yeah.
My ability to provide a support structure for my kids, even though they're in their 20s, that never ends. Now, how I do it changes, but it's important to start with open communication. It's important to start with developing trust. It's important to ensure that your child has a safe place to express their emotions, whether you like what they have to say or not, and then to become judgmental. Keep that to as low as possible, to be non-judgmental in what they have to say to you, because they're going to get judged enough in society and by their friends. And so by creating a safe place, a haven for them to be emotionally well, will prove well and beneficial for you as a parent, and as you begin to nurture them from becoming teenagers into adulthood.
And when you're having these conversations, I can guarantee you're not always going to like their answer, but you can't anticipate what they're going to say. You can't, and jumping in with, oh yeah, I know, I've been there, I've done that. No, don't, we're not going to anticipate what they're going to say. We're going to really hear and appreciate the fact that I may not like this answer, but that's okay, because it's not my answer. Correct. It's their answer. I think that's
that is so powerful. Cheryl, I oftentimes say, when we listen to comprehend and not listen to respond, we get a lot more from the particular conversation. And so if I'm listening to comprehend, that means that I'm going to set my active listening skills on understanding not just the content, but the context of what is being said. Because remember, even as a parent, I'm developing collaboration and partnership around helping my child to overcome whatever the issue is, and or to affirm that I'm showing support for their success. And so take a moment to listen to comprehend, not to respond. That is extremely important as a part of developing that healthy boundaries and effective listening skills and working with our kids.
I love that. Oh, I hate when I have to wrap up, because I feel like we could talk for another 5 hours, but this has been incredibly valuable. I'm so grateful for your work and what you're putting out there. I mean, oh my goodness, what a gift you are. And so tell us about the rest of your gifts before we go. Cedric, what can we read? Where can we find you? How can we, all things Dr. Cedric Howard, please?
Oh, so first, I'm on all social media. Just look for Cedric, CEDRCB Howard. And so Cedric B. Howard is who I am. Social media, LinkedIn, all the social media platforms. My wife and I actually manage a YouTube channel where we put out information, because what we want to do is make sure everyone has a healthy relationship with themselves and their families. So, and that is financial. So we do financial literacy, leadership, resiliency training. And our website and our YouTube channel is Bowtie Chronicles, because I wear a bow tie every day.
Love it.
And so you talk about a hey, I've been wearing a bow tie since I was 4. And
oh my gosh, I thought that was just for me.
Yeah, it is for you, Cheryl. It is for you.
Okay.
And so you go to Bowtie Chronicles. You can follow us and see what we're putting out from that perspective. Realize, I think it is an honor for me. Remember, education is a shared endeavor. And when everyone kind of participates, we can grow and develop as a community. And so what I do is to try to share my gift to help everyone have the ability to have transformation within their family and lives, because that is my why. And that's what gives me honor and privilege from that perspective.
I love it. And I'm going to put everything in the show notes, so you don't have to start memorizing this, listeners. But again, thank you, Dr. Cedric Howard. Thank you for listening. I am so grateful that you have us in your ear today, just for the sole purpose of transforming the relationships you have with yourself and with your teen. What better way to go? And thank you again for listening. Parenting Teens, Advice Redefined for Today's World. We'll see you next time.